because it doesn't appear as though the likelihood of being extradited from that country for seed sales is very great. I don't know of many other places in the world where seeds are being sent to from into this country at this point.
You know, regarding seeds, a fascinating thing, there's a bill pending now in the state legislature to modify our medical marijuana law so that there could be dispensaries that could provide to people that that have a permit or a prescription to get medical marijuana. But under the definition, they don't consider as marijuana seeds, stems, or leaves. You know, I guess the standards have gone up so high that I guess bud is what people use. You know, from back in the 1960s, we didn't know what bud was. You know, leaves were what you smoked, and when things were tough, it was down to seeds and stems, as the phrase went. So, I guess it's a new world. I haven't participated in the market for a long time. I gather the quality's gone up and the price also.
Okay, well, thank you so very much. Again, Jim took a day off practicing law in Seattle to come here, and we're very grateful for the time and energy he spent today, and just in general for getting out and helping to spread the message of LEAP. It's very important. It's wonderful to have academics and officers and other people speaking for the legalization of all drugs. And it's one thing to be a user of something and wanting it to be legal, but to have sober-minded and very respected citizens speaking out, it's critical to us. And as I mentioned earlier, we do have a member of LEAP in Victoria, David Bratzer, an active police officer, but unfortunately he is an exhibits officer in our bakery trial, so we're keeping him out of any hempology meetings for the time being, but our preliminary inquiry is expected in May, at which point we'll be inviting him likely to come and speak next year and stuff. And David Bratzer is an interesting story in and of himself, because in Victoria we've been pushing with hempology and other people as well to legalize cannabis, to be sure. And a lot of members of the Victoria Police Force, much like Seattle's, have gotten tired of busting us going to 420 or anything to that effect. And to the point where when David came public, it wasn't just his own opinion. David's actually the third youngest police officer in his family. He's got two older brothers in the force. And the reason, or one of the main reasons that David felt comfortable and was able to go public with his position is because the Victoria Police Force, for the most part, supports change to drug policy. They realize that it's just not working. And it's something where other officers will tell David, good on you, I support you, I'm just not going to put my name behind it. But David is still very active with LEAP and promoting the legalization of all drugs, and we're hoping more officers to come with it. But oh, you have one more thing, Jim? I see it now.
Yeah.
I would be remiss, I forgot one thing. Our organization loves to have people become members to show your support for LEAP. We have sign-up sheets in the back. You don't have to give us money, but like any organization, the more people that sign up to support our organization, it helps us when we lobby and push for change. So feel free to sign up. And also, again, our website has a wealth of information and links to other websites that can provide information. But most people are pretty good on the web, and you'll know where to look for other stuff. But our website is leap.cc. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just to show it's not all people, even in law enforcement, at the back is Steve Finley with the shirt and tie as well. He's an economist helping out law enforcement against prohibition, and so there's lots of opportunities to get out and work and advocate with these different groups, and please do so. So 15 years ago, I decided that it was time for someone in Victoria to start selling medical marijuana. I lived in a van, I got a pager and a pamphlet. I was already doing hempology meetings. I had a club just barely started at UVic and was laying a framework to educate the public about this herb. And in doing so, I started to meet people that needed medicine. California, back in 1995, was very involved in the medical marijuana movement at that point. The Cannabis Buyers Club in San Francisco was the flagship at the time and was going full tilt. It was very inspiring to hear, but it wasn't helping people in my town. And so with a pager and a pamphlet, I decided that we were going to sell cannabis products to people with permanent physical disabilities and diseases. We realized requiring a recommendation was putting a barrier before patients, giving control to the doctors. As soon as the doctors can make a decision about a person's use of medicine, then the patient no longer has control. So we decided that a diagnosis of chronic pain, any doctor's information that confirmed the person had a chronic pain issue, and the long form is permanent physical disabilities and diseases. Because some issues are not necessarily included in chronic pain, epilepsy, glaucoma. There's a lot of different problems that cannabis helps with. And so we made our decision based essentially on the Morgentaler decision, where as a caregiver, Henry Morgentaler in the 1980s, argued that the Charter of Rights and Freedoms protected his right as a medical provider to provide for a medical need when a person had essentially a necessity, a medical necessity. And so it was argued that Morgentaler had this civic duty to protect vulnerable citizens by providing this alternative. And in his case, it was abortions. Even though abortions were legal, the system was so cumbersome, it was essentially illusionary, and the courts ruled that their programs were so dysfunctional that Morgentaler again had the civic duty to provide medicine. And that is essentially the same charter right that I have invoked to help people that need medicine. One of the things that got me into it was I met a lady who made cookies and brownies and sauve as well. And it blew my mind, right? Like, what got me into hempology at first actually had nothing to do with smoking pot. Sure, I loved it. I've been smoking, buying, selling pot for 25 years now. But when I first came across the hempology meetings, the first thing that actually got me involved was hemp. I'm a 7th-generation farmer on both sides. And when I found out that the recent sort of wave of prohibition was in fact intended and successfully took this plant away from my family so they couldn't grow their own fuel, because you could just press the seed, put the oil into an engine, you could get your tractors going, you could get your generators going. So you got all your heat, your electricity, the leftover mash, you could feed your animals, feed your family. The seed oil as well could be used to light, like in candles, or all sorts of different uses. And then you'd have stock left over. It would have saved the family farm, you could say. And I will say that because on my dad's side of the family at least, there isn't a single one of my cousins that's going to afford a family farm. The banks and others have increased the value of the dairy quota and land to the point where no one in my generation is going to stay on these farms. We've had farms in Canada for 200 years. And if they would have been growing hemp in the last century, this would not be the case. My family would be very healthy, alive, and strong on their farms, but such is not the case. Anyway, that's what got me into hempology. And then I started meeting sick people, and it kind of took me sideways a little bit because I really wanted to educate the world, and then I started meeting these people that were sick and dying. And then, again, my friend made these food and skin products, and she worked in the AIDS community. And it just completely opened me up to a whole new world of possibilities. And what I've learned is cannabis has about 70 active ingredients, different cannabinoids, terpenes, flavonoids, and the essential oil. And each plant only contains 6 to 12 of that group of 70 cannabinoids, which is why each strain is subtly different. They all have THC, which is the most active agent. It's the main painkiller. It has antibiotic effects and muscle relaxing effects and stuff, but it's really not the only important one. If Dr. Hornby was here today, he'd be talking about CBD till he turned blue, because CBD is a muscle relaxant. Indicas are heavy in CBD. They're incredibly beneficial for people that have got chronic pain and certain medical problems. Unfortunately, they're not as available on the greater market. The greater market right now is leaning towards the sativa strains, which contain less of the CBD and more of something called CBN, which is sort of a nervous stimulant, gives you the head stone sort of effect. Jack Hare, Cali Mist, a lot of sativa strains. They go great big bushy plants, and so people with MMAR licenses are generally growing sativas, which is really unfortunate. They're going by plant counts instead of growing the sea of green with indicas, because that's what they should be growing. But they're going to the big plants with the sativas, which give a really great head stone, unless you have some mental health issues, because those will just send you off the deep end. You really need the indicas, the muscle relaxants, right? There's a vast difference between the different strains. And these different plants, again, have those 3 main cannabinoids, and then different trace amounts of the other 70 cannabinoids. Now, in total, these not only relax your muscles and kill pain, but they're anti-inflammatory, antibiotic, antiseptic, antifungal, antioxidant, anti-carcinogenic. There's a lot of things that are occurring. Most of them you're not conscious of, right? You smoke a joint or eat a cookie, you get the head stone effect, you get your muscles relaxed, but you can't feel anti-inflammatory work, and certainly I can't. I'm not healthy as an ox. So, but if you're in chronic pain, the anti-inflammatory benefits are really critical. You know, we talk about the smooth muscle benefits. They're obvious, right? Your stomach's a smooth muscle. You smoke a joint, you got nausea because of your cancer, hepatitis C, something. Well, your stomach's going to relax. Different cannabinoids trigger your appetite in your brain. And so instead of feeling sick for people, they all of a sudden they're hungry, right? And the combination of cannabinoids are doing that for them. And you know, we've talked a lot about that. That's something most people know. But it's the anti-inflammatory effects that are really vastly underestimated and really kick in when you eat it or apply it on the skin. Because a lot of different issues, say, you know, head injuries, certainly any muscular problems, you know, back problems and stuff. Like, it's the inflammation that's causing the problem. Irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's disease, a lot of other conditions like hepatitis C. It's when your liver swells up that it's actually becoming painful. If your liver is not inflamed from the hepatitis C, it's fairly manageable. But it's the inflammation that leads to the pain. And when you eat cannabis, it's much more effective than smoking it, which is why, in some sense, very small amounts of cannabis when eaten are much more effective than smoking. You're really wasting most of the medicine when you smoke it. The cannabinoids are much more stable when it's cooked into a vegetable oil and absorbed into the stomach or through the skin. And so the cannabinoids last for 4 to 6 hours, as opposed to like the 15-minute shot that you get when you smoke a joint. The anti-inflammatory benefits don't really kick in unless you're smoking a joint every hour or so, and I guess some people do these days, but it's something that a lot of people just can't afford to do, right? Most people in medical need get like down to the bottom of the barrel. If they could scrape out $5 for a day, honestly, some of them are doing very well for themselves. So, you know, most people, you know, well, maybe most of the ones I work with at least, are really, you know, hurting, and so the complement of eating cannabis and smoking it really for most people is incredibly beneficial. And so our group has gone out of its way to provide edible and topical products at the lowest cost possible. Our cookies are $1 right now. And for a lot of people, a quarter of a cookie is enough medicine for them. And in contrast, the THC pills sold by the federal government, I believe right now it's $8 for a Marinol pill. So 20 capsules cost you $160. And I think it's something like 8 or 10 of our cookies would have about the same medical benefit as the $160 in synthetic THC capsules that don't have all these essential oils and terpenes and CBD and all these other beneficial complementary medicines. So, and that's why you gain benefit from mixing 2 or 3 herbs into either a joint or a cookie or something, because every flavonoid, every terpene, every cannabinoid you introduce has an effect with your endocannabinoid system. Don't have time to get into that, but certainly each cannabinoid would trigger various receptors throughout your body, and they complement and work synergistically with each other. And so I advise you, it's great to test a kush in a joint, but when you mix things up, you're really getting the ultimate benefit. And I don't believe in the strain game as a result of that. A lot of people think, oh, this strain works for this condition. Well, to me, the ultimate would be to have patients using different strains every day. Like if they need heavy indicas, like 30 different strains over 30 different days would benefit them more than the same one every day. Again, one of the main problems with Health Canada's regime would have patients using the same pot from the same crop every day throughout the year. Patients need choice. Patients need the best medicine available. And that's why we formed clubs. So I mentioned my Cannabis Buyers Club. Starting from a van, I got a store. I worked out of that for now almost 10 years. We've been through 4 police raids. We've beaten every single charge laid against us. But we have a new challenge ahead of us here. Thank you. We're up to 29 fruit-and-strain products that we make, all sorts of different salves and creams and cookies. We make a lozenge, and kind of spaced out. We didn't bring any pamphlets for it. So next week, if you come to the Canamare Fed, I'll have, or Canamed Fair, I'll have some pamphlets. I'll talk more about that towards the end. But yeah, our product guide is online if you want to learn how to make any of our food and skin products. We talk about decarboxylizing and all of our other little tricks like using lecithin to help with the absorption and such. We really want to teach people how to make the best possible medicine from this plant. And there's other ways to do it. We don't use alcohol, for example, and there's tinctures and all sorts of other things that you can do. But we're really proud of the products that we've created. We've helped hundreds of people get off prescription drugs entirely and improve their lives in so doing. And many others have cut down their use of prescriptions. Again, we have 3,400 members that come to our club. And last year, as I mentioned, our bakery got raided. And my friend Owen Smith has been charged with trafficking in marijuana and trafficking in THC for the food and skin products. Because if you got a license from Health Canada right now, you can grow your own pot, you can smoke it till you're blue, but if you extract it through a cheesecloth, like if you cook it into an oil or butter, you've produced a drug called THC, and that's illegal. And you could buy synthetic THC, but you can't make something like it. Unfortunately, if you just leave it in the bud or the oil and try to eat it, anybody with a gastrointestinal problem is going to rip their intestines to shreds, and for the healthy person, it just really makes you go to the bathroom very consistently. It's not the best use of the plant here. And so we have a very interesting trial before us. We're expecting a full 20-day jury trial. We'll have expert witnesses from Health Canada and certainly a few of our own. This is, however, in Victoria. That's my hometown. So if you want to come and see the circus, you'll have to come see us over there. But otherwise, we will keep you informed as much as possible through our newspaper and other events and things like that. But it's going to be a very interesting year for us at the Cannabis Project Club, to be sure. And so we have $100,000. Well, it says 80 here, but 20-day jury trials aren't cheap. So we're fundraising. We've got about, I think, 6 that we've raised so far, although it doesn't all show here. I'm throwing all sorts of parties in Victoria, well, maybe some here actually, but the next party I'm throwing is after the February 20th Cannabis Convention at UVic. We have a after-hours non-alcohol club, so we are having a party there. Jeremiah, who's in the middle there, is coming from Cannabis Culture to speak, along with Chris Bennett, who opened up today. We have Bill Finley from Hemp and Company, and as I mentioned earlier, John Anderson, the criminology professor from VIU, is coming to Victoria on February 20th. It's the end of International Medical Marijuana Week, actually, between the 13th and 20th of February. I've got 11 events I'm doing in 8 days, so if you want to come over and see some of the work we're doing there, please do so. But I could go on all day about the stuff I do. In fact, we have 26 meetings and such this month alone. There's all sorts of stuff that we're up to. And I'll tell you a bit more before we leave, but we have one more keynote speaker here who has taken the afternoon from his law practice.
Can I ask you one question?
Alrighty.
Okay, I belong to 2 clubs. One, the Compassion Club, and the other, the Green Cross. And you're really right about people who need the medicine to go in there and get it. But in the Green Cross, their prices have gone up. There's no more $8 bud. There's, you know, $10 and $11 bud. And, you know, can you guys do something, a special price for the people who really need that?
Well, I wish the other clubs took the same tangent I did, but in essence, these groups cost a lot of money to get up and running and keep going. I think it surprises some people how much. I personally don't run these groups, so I can't do much. I know in Victoria we've got probably the lowest prices in the country, and aside from leading by example, there isn't very much that I can do. It's unfortunate how much people are being charged. I think part of what may end up happening as more dispensaries open up here, there could be some competition between clubs for members, and I think competition is a healthy thing. I think that the more groups, we got 2 in Victoria, and we've really helped each other improve our standards and get more products and, you know, keep the prices down. So I really think that there's an explosion happening over here that's quite wonderful to see. It's about time. We've had 2 in Victoria for over a decade, and it wasn't happening here. So it's just amazing and wonderful to see it start to flourish. And I really hope that some competition helps bring the prices down. I'm not sure why they've gone up again it's sort of not something I'm directly involved in. I hesitate to take many more questions though, because John does have some time.
Not so much a question, but don't forget the basic reason the price is so high.
It's illegal.
Oh, it's illegal, yeah. It's like we're paying through the nose. See, and the thing about the clubs is that we try to have, as far as I'm concerned, the best medicine out there. And a lot of growers, unfortunately, aren't committed to these clubs, and a lot of them are fickle. And if they can get more money somewhere else, many of them will. And I'm quite lucky. I got 24 growers that are locked in, but I want to work with small mom and pop growers producing high quality organic medicine. And that isn't done cheaply or easily. Pretty much every one of my growers owns their own property, and I've got about 24 of them. They could all have their property taken. I don't blame them for squirreling away a bit or taking care of themselves. They have a lot to risk. Their families could be taken from them. So it's really the cost of the medicine that is keeping the prices up. It's very unfortunate, but I'm really, it's really neat to see the overgrow the government kind of theme that the MMAR seems to be picking up on, because there's this sort of flood, I think, occurring of medicine, but at the same time it's very unfortunate to see the prices still so high. And in California too, the prices are quite high. But the other thing too, like people are like, oh, I can get it cheaper off my dealer. Well, your dealer doesn't have a store, right? Your dealer isn't, like a lot of these clubs here, and I don't, but a lot of them are paying taxes for their employees and stuff like that. Like, personally, I don't do that, but if our employees were paying taxes, I'd have to charge more money. I just can't come up with the money out of nowhere. I think Michael had a question there.
Yeah, I run a dispensary in Maple Ridge called Ken's Dispensary. We got a lot of buds that are at $10 a gram, but that's because for that product we have to pay more money for chalk dollars sometimes, right? But on our menu we also have grams that are $6, $5. Sometimes we sell different strains for $4, like a bag for $4. We try to give something for everybody. It's great though. We do pay a lot of money. We do pay higher rent for what we do. Like I know I'm paying a lot of rent for where I am, but I have to be there. There's only a certain area I can be. So
I don't mean to be rude, folks. I'm going to get John to come on up here. John, time's just whizzing on by here. I don't mean to be rude with this group. I don't doubt we could have an ongoing conversation for a long time, but I really would like to get John up here. John's done a significant amount of work in this field, as much as with Compassion Club growers and clubs like mine, and working in the field. He's also one of the lead attorneys in the Insight decision or challenge here in Vancouver, which is very important as well. We're so pleased to have him here, and I'm so happy to have him working on my court case. I've seen him working for a long time, and this is the first time we've worked directly together, really. So thank you so much, Jim.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Excuse me, I've been fighting a bit of a cold, so I'm coughing from time to time. I thought I'd start, in fact, this keeps sliding off here, so I think what I'll do is I'll just put it here. But the last point about black markets and the prices, and I think the best argument for why prohibition doesn't work is to focus not just on the drug or a particular thing, but a legal approach. The other legal approaches are to regulate and tax, and that's usually what we mean by legalization. But to illustrate the folly of prohibition, my practice involves not just representing people who are charged with offenses, but I'm also in Abbotsford, so I'm surrounded by prisons, the Kingston of the West. And so I deal with a lot of people who are in prison. And what they, in their wisdom, decided to do a couple of years ago was to ban tobacco.
Oh, smart.
Well, we've been very successful in educating people to reduce their tobacco consumption because of the harms that it can cause to you. We've never used prohibition in relation to tobacco that I can think of or from my studies. So what happened when they banned tobacco in the prisons? The price of a cigarette went from $1 to $10. People are now going to the hole for being involved in the tobacco trade. People are being shipped to maximum security for trafficking in tobacco. The staff, of course, used to come in the morning to their shift and leave in the afternoon. Now go in and out 20 times a day because they have to go out to the parking lot to smoke. This also gives them the opportunity to bring in tobacco 20 times a day instead of once a day, because after all, they're addicted too, and they have some sympathy for the prisoner addicts who can't get the same drug that they're into. And so it's just a matter of time. In fact, I'm told people are already been stabbed over tobacco. When the price goes up and you've only got a little money, it becomes of great value. That's what happens. You know, that's the problem with the entire drug war. I had a person call me the other day who said, listen, some people came in and they beat me up and they're threatening to beat up my family and they're saying I owe them money. What can you do? And I have to say, there's nothing I can do. You're involved in an unlawful activity. You can't come to see a lawyer. You can't sue the people or go get a restraining order or anything like that. You chose to get involved in an underground black market activity, and so you can defend yourself or you can go to the police. Of course, if you go to the police and if they find out you went to the police, then they're going to brand you as a rat, and that might make your family in greater danger. So the whole thing is completely insane. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever, and I say that tobacco illustration just is the classic example of that type of an approach. So it's not the particular drug necessarily, it's the approach, because that approach, if there's a demand, forces the price up, and that's what you get. Anyway, I thought I'd also tell you, first of all, I'm also a member of LEAP. I'm pleased to wear my pin. Jack Cole, who was the founding member, invited me to become a member. And I encourage all of you to do so. I get great reactions in the halls of the courthouses, especially from police officers who come up to me and they say, is that a police badge you're wearing, Conroy? Which usually, when they look closer and see that it's LEAP, they all jump back, having heard about it. But as I think some of the speakers said, many of them are actually supportive, but they won't say so until they retire or have left the force. So, I thought I'd tell you another funny story before trying to get you into the framework of what's been going on and up to where we currently are, particularly with the Van Du case. One of my favorite cases was I acted once for Watermelon. You all know who Watermelon is?
Yeah.
Okay. So Watermelon was sunbathing out at Wreck Beach, which all of you know is a nude beach, and she became quite well known as the lady who sold crazy cookies. And so Watermelon would walk up and down Wreck Beach advertising crazy cookies, and so the UBC detachment decided to do, yes, an undercover operation on a nude beach. So they put their bathing suits on, went down to Wreck Beach, and as Watermelon came by, they said, oh, you know, we'd like to try some, and they had her explain what was in them and all these sorts of things so as to incriminate herself. And then the first time they actually busted her right there on the beach. There was almost a riot because of all the supporters of Watermelon. I mean, and the irony was some other people were selling booze and other things, and that wasn't the problem. It was the cookies that they were after. So they did it, I think, about 3 times, but wisened up and didn't bust her the subsequent times until she was up the stairs there at the top of the beach. And so the interesting thing was they charged her with trafficking in cannabis marijuana. Now, in Canada, you have cannabis, marijuana. These are the definitions in the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act, and you have cannabis resin. And it turned out, I went home and I said to my wife, they're charged you with cookies. How are they able to tell what's in the cookie? What do they do? And she said, well, they wouldn't be able to tell when you make up the batter and so on. They're not going to be able to tell as long as you've ground everything up properly and so on. So when we got to cross-examine the expert, he conceded that what they had done was they had looked at the cookie under a microscope and they didn't see any green plant-like material. So they said, well, it's not cannabis marijuana, it's cannabis resin. And they charged her with trafficking in cannabis resin. Well, cross-examination proceeded. You didn't see any resin in that cookie, did you? Oh, didn't. So the funny part of it was that the judge then acquitted her because they couldn't prove that she had trafficked in cannabis resin. And from then on, they charge people with the specific cannabinoid in the cookie. So they will do a chemical analysis now to try and find THC or CBD